Hi, everyone, and welcome to a very interesting episode of the Small Town Entrepreneur Podcast. I don't know if I'll regret this, to be honest. This is new, but I've had so many conversations with a lot of different people over the last couple months, couple years, and let's be honest, life is really hard, and it has had a lot of shifts and a lot of changes post-pandemic, during the pandemic, and we're seeing so many other things in the world that is heavy. And I just read a statistic that being lonely is the equivalent of smoking 15 cigarettes a day, which I just couldn't believe. And I thought, I'm going to pull back the curtain. This is what it's about. This is what I'm passionate about. This is the work that I promised myself that I was going to put in the work so that I could see that there was another side. 9 years ago, I was incredibly ill. I suffered from a lot of mental health issues, from anxiety, and as a result, depression. I was diagnosed with ADHD with my psychiatrist. But before that, it was a whole gambit of things from bipolar to PMDD to all these different things. And it was a really scary time being a young woman navigating a new career, or my first career as a teacher. And I was not okay. I was very sick. And it's just wild to think where I was 9 years ago and the conversations and the work I've put in and the guidance of having therapists and putting in the homework or doing the homework and keep showing up. I talk about it. It was really hard. This is something I thought I would share, is my very last therapy session with my therapist. Warning, I get a little teary-eyed near the end, and it was weird because I knew I was recording it, but I wanted to be really true to myself and know that I think the best way I can learn and the best way that I share is while I'm doing it, I share it in real time, because things do pass and you forget the journey that you've come. So here is, after 9 years of therapy, this is the very last conversation. Truthfully, I wish I had the first conversation that I had with my therapist. We do cover it in this session, but I want you to hear this to know, we all struggle. And wherever you are on this journey, this is only for those people that some days wake up and just don't know how to get out of bed, get the next, put the next foot in front of themselves. This sharing is just so that you know that there is an opportunity out there, whether it's finding the right community, being able to have the support of a therapist, finding other people. And I'm going to leave you with one very fascinating statistic that I was blown away. A recent interview that I listened to with the newest book by Charles Duhigg called Super Communicator. And one of the statistics was that they followed individuals all the way till 65. And the three key markers were success. Did they consider them successful? The second was, were they happy? And the third one was, were they healthy? And the one factor, the one commonality through looking at all of them, you assume was like, what was their parents like? Or, what was our upbringing and how much do they exercise or what did they eat and all these things we think about. But strangely enough, came down to the fact that at the age of 45, could they call up a handful of friends and talk about anything? That was it. And then hearing the statistic that being lonely is equivalent to 15 cigarettes a day, of course, that makes so much sense. So I want this episode to break down I don't want people to feel lonely. And this is my, attempt to, you don't have to be alone. There are people out there that are willing to share, like myself and other people that are willing to talk about the hard stuff, and that's what we need each other for. And so I'm breaking up this, entrepreneurial journey in that we have to recognize also the parameters of our strengths and our weaknesses, and recognize when we do need help. When do we know that we are just maybe not okay and we need help and we need to talk to someone? And so here is, after 9 years, every 2 weeks, every month for 9 years, a conversation that wraps it all up with the one and only, which has transformed my life, is Dr. Duffy. And coming soon is the Duffy method that I hopefully one day can share with you. Thank you for being here, and enjoy my last therapy session. It's going well. I think life is just one of those things where there's always problems, but then some problems, if they keep persisting for long enough, you get frustrated and you're like, this can't keep going like this. So you butt heads, or something happens that makes you shift. So it's going really well, actually. I mean, it's hard running a business and not having childcare right now. And, I have ADHD. Kevin has a brain injury.
Yeah.
I think I just sometimes have to be like, I can't solve all the problems by tomorrow, even though I'm impatient, and the second I recognize there's a problem and there needs to be change, I want everything to happen tomorrow. But I'm starting to just take a step back, and actually I was like literally researching, what are some questions after 8 years of CBT with my therapist? What are things that I should discuss with my final session?
Okay.
And then it was funny. It said, reflect on your journey, express gratitude, which I'm very grateful. Capture it. So I want to record this conversation, if you don't mind.
It's your conversation. You can record it.
I think it helps me. This is a big, and also, like, at the end of the day, it's like changes are so subtle. And when I think back, like, where I was on day one, it was like, what are the most significant changes you've seen in me over the years? These are questions I'm supposed to ask you. How do you think I can best maintain progress after therapy ends? And I know we've talked about it, but I also feel like I started to get really anxious knowing that I've just always known that I had a conversation like this that was continuous. Is, that I knew that, okay, I'll deal with this. I'll like put this aside and I'll deal with this come therapy, right? Or what would Dr. Duffy say? But I feel like, not to be morbid, but when a friend dies, you really remember them. And as time goes on, they become less and less. Like, you'll always remember them, but they're not so prominent in your life.
That's right.
And so my biggest fear, not that I think you're gonna die, but more or less in my life, you're not there anymore. And I didn't think I'd feel like this, but I'm anxious.
Well, Claire, you've done a long way in doing a lot of good. As I said, 24th of November in 2015, 9 years ago. And your goal at the time, not let the world get in my head, i.e. care about what everyone thinks of me. In other words, not be listening to other people in terms of your self-worth. How have you done with that?
Good.
So we basically, I've got quite the file going over, and the progress you've made evolving into the influencer, the entrepreneur, and having to, as you say, declutter, but declutter your schedule as well as your environment. Mm-hmm. You got very good at setting out kind of visual agendas, your organizing of a day, of a week. You became very good at that. And you basically also have become very good at who owns what, not looking to invalid sources for value was a very powerful and is a very powerful tool. You know, that idea that if someone doesn't have the cognitive wherewithal to give you full and fair measure of your worth, then that person has basically invalidated themselves as a valid source or as a valid judgment. Mm-hmm. You know, the defect is in them, not you. A lot of the work we did also was just how to cool, breathe, remembering to breathe. It has to do with anger, as also to do with anxiety and stress. Being able to take the breath and melt the shoulders at key moments. Also doing that preventatively, remembering to breathe throughout the day and keeping that up every hour if you can, or set up a cue like a sticker or something to remind you, as well as the full-blown anti-anxiety tools. In addition to breathing and melting shoulders, the calming picture, the object, the scent. Now your object and scent and everything is over. You know, but he calms you down.
Unless he is having a massive meltdown downtown Ottawa like this weekend.
Well, that happens too.
Oh, man.
Yeah, but basically, that's the time when you are cool and remember to breathe and melt your own shoulders. And basically, you've come a long way from when we started 9 years ago. Very long way. And you couldn't have imagined yourself with the right guy and a baby.
No, not at all. It is, even those two things alone, I have to remember, yeah.
And yes, taking things in stride, that learning how to breathe, doing it proactively, doing full quits when you are, under stress to kind of recompose, and also taking care of the basics. You're doing really, you do cardio when you're physically able. You do your socialization with the editing out of the people who are a drag and a drain, and, focusing on the ones who are good for you. Protecting sleep. You've done that. You've had to do that. And if your baby's eating healthy, you're eating healthy.
Yeah.
That is self-perpetuating. Two things about going forward, Clint. The degree to which you think you've taken control over what used to have control over you is the single most powerful prognostic or forward-looking indicator that you will remain in remission in terms of anxiety, stress, whatever. What do you give yourself in that in terms of taking control over things that used to have control over you, using your tools and techniques?
You know what, it's funny because I've thought about it. I feel like it's not so more about giving a score of 1 to 10, but it's more of a score of the length that it affects me, if that makes sense.
Yep.
So
duration. Yep.
It's almost like, the duration of it is like, before it used to be like watching, the pain is like slowly equivalent of a candle melting, whereas now it's like touching a hot pan, that I'm like, this is horrible and I don't like it, that I remove my hand quickly and leave the situation. I don't know if that's a great analogy, but I was just picturing just letting something slowly, even microwave itself to melting point.
Well, one, it means you're in charge.
In charge, but I still react. I still maybe aggressively react in the situation for positive or negative. And I experienced one of those this past weekend, and it was a reminder of like, I find that I do really care about my relationships more than anything in my life, whether they're strangers or my best friend or my husband. The number one thing that's always completely crippled me if something is, not in line or it's not healthy, I am so affected. And it used to be, oh my gosh, days, maybe weeks of something that if it wasn't resolved, And now I'm able to go into this mindset that since day one, you've always said, what would your best friend tell you in this situation? And it's funny, ironically enough, not only am I immediately going into that perspective and being like, as an outsider, what would I say to me? Or what would I say to a best friend? And I'm able to switch the mindset way faster and be like, well, this is ridiculous. This person is absolutely ridiculous, which I had not a great encounter with a neighbor, which is very disappointing, but I had to look at the situation from a different perspective, and I was able to get through it way better than I would have in the past. And it's funny, I'm starting to notice when other people are saying things that are completely invalid or really detrimental, and I'm like, what would you tell me? And it's funny, I'm starting to echo the Duffy method, I'm calling it.
Yeah.
And so I am still far from, there's obviously some things that trigger me a little more than others, but I would say, when I first started therapy and I was I was so sick when I first started. Like, I was at a 1 or a 2, and some days I feel like I've hit that 9, but I guess I can attribute it to repetition, having every 2 weeks to a month having a therapy session. And then now that it's over, I'm wondering, as you say, when something becomes distanced, do I lose that muscle of being able to switch my mindset into third person or looking from a different perspective as quickly? Will I lose that? Because I always have to come back to these conversations, to these sessions, and almost have to score myself or do a debrief. But what happens if I know my brain is wired to forget things and just move on to the next thing, and I'm such a creature of my environment, and I'm worried that not having this accountability, what does happen in 5 years or 3 years or 10 years? I guess that's ultimately the
other indicator of you keeping the stress and anxiety and the despair at times, keeping all that in remission. It is having the control over what used to have control over you, using all the various tools.
Mm-hmm.
And you articulate it well. I mean, you're describing these tools perfectly. The antidote to emotional reasoning, what would you say to a friend and what would I say to you, and etc. And basically, the ability that you can hit a 9 out of 10 in terms of meeting your goals, your personal goals, and you have the notes, and it sounds like, sure, you're not going to remember them at your fingertips, but if you have been looking over your notes, and I'm sure things came back at you that you haven't thought about for a long time, probably haven't needed for a long time. But the notes are a playbook that works, and you will recall exactly, the sessions and what we were doing and the kind of work we were doing. And you've got a good knack of applying it, finding, seeing ways of translating a situation into an opportunity or a need of doing such and such, or maybe reminding you.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to read it every day, but you might want to go through it. You just sit down and go through it section at a time.
But that's what I'm worried about, is that, you think you're okay until you're not, or you forget and be like, oh, I'll come to it. But when there's that call, when you know that I also have to show up because you're on the other end, there's a lot of times, no offense, I just didn't want to do therapy. I didn't feel like talking about how I was feeling, or had to go back and review, and you're just not in the mood, or whatever it is. So that's what worries me.
You don't wait till you feel like doing something. You
do
something to change how you feel. And and basically that's what the power of the tools is. It puts you in the driver's seat. Now, you're the one that's got to be doing the driving, but you have that choice now.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to sit there and take it. And it isn't dependent on me calling. It is in your lap.
Hmm.
But this is what the power of it is that you have that option. You can change the bad moment.
Yeah, and I think that's what it comes down to.
But yeah, but that's the deal. But this it lets you solo. And that's what you now have the power to do. And you now have the tools to do.
Yeah.
And it sometimes helps to, that, I don't want to do it kind of thing. Dependent recall is the trickster. We talked about that very early.
Yeah.
The voice, don't bother. What the hell? Let it go. Who cares? That's a joker. That's a trickster. It's a serpent, in the grass. But sometimes what helps is a little simple log. He said sometimes you're a 9.
But also sometimes I'm not.
Sometimes you're not, yeah. But you know what? I mean, usually the hardest things to do is the cardio consistently.
Yeah.
Socializing with the right people consistently.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I understood you've been much more attentive to sleep. You really have had no choice but to kind of sleep.
Having a baby has been the best thing for me, to be honest.
Yeah.
To be like...
And eating healthy, because you can't, if you don't eat healthy, your baby doesn't eat healthy.
Well, no. And, I mean, I would eat healthy. It was more, for me, it was the problem of actually making sure I sat down to eat. I would just put it off. And it's funny because you know how we talked about socializing and the importance of it. I was going to tell you there's this new book that I just listened to, a podcast interview. I want to read the book, but this was the best quick version. It was with Charles Duhigg. He wrote the book Power of Habit, but he's written a couple other, and the most recent one, there was a study, it's called Super Communicator, and I just thought of you because I was like, this is wild. There was research, and I've heard bits of it, but to actually hear him saying that being lonely is equivalent of smoking 15 cigarettes a day.
Oh yeah, no, there's a huge... Loneliness is a real health hazard.
I had no idea because I've always...
You're not that person.
Well, if I'm going through something or I'm celebrating something, I like to talk it through. And so I usually gravitate to someone else that wants to listen or they're going through it too, whatever it is. I just couldn't imagine that is equivalent of loneliness.
Well, it certainly is basically, it's a new pandemic, and there's all kinds of stuff about it. But that's not your problem.
Sorry, I just...
So, basically...
I just couldn't believe it when you always asked me if I was socializing.
Yeah, for Claire's kit, we don't have to use tech. We check that box. And with good people, that's still your job.
Well, and I think that was when we started therapy.
The drags, and I mean, basically, and here's what you want to have a tool to help you stay on track. Even though I'm not going to be calling, those calendars with the squares,
like
1-inch squares, calendars on the wall.
Oh, like a count. Yes, I have it on my fridge.
Yeah, right.
Yes.
And then you put a 1-inch square. You know what you can put in there? I want you to score yourself out of 10 on how do you feel, cardio, and then give yourself a count out of 10. And it's a positive thing. Good is a 10.
Yeah.
Okay. So you have you put cardio there.
Yeah.
Every day. Cardio, give it a score.
Every day, not once a week. I feel like I'm not good with daily, but I can do a debrief at the end of the week.
I want you to do it at the time. Because here's the point.
Oh.
What we're up against is mood-dependent recall. And that's the trickster voice that to say, oh, don't bother. It doesn't work. You had, blah, blah, blah. It lies. So if you're in that, if mood-dependent recall is doing its toxic sort of corrosion of how you are,
yeah,
it's going to give you a lie about how Monday was. But your log is going to counter that lie. But you got to do the log every day, and it's going to take 2 seconds.
Yeah.
You write down the number. But it means that you actually look at, then you've got the antidote to mood-dependent recall, which will try and knock you off your game.
Mm-hmm.
So basically it means, that square you can put 2 or 3 things. You can put cardio and you give it a number, what it felt like after. You can put a socialization and give it a number, after.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you can tick that you had good sleep, and and nutrition's probably a constant. You don't really have to do that, but just by giving those numbers, those 3, a number for cardio, a number for socialization, and a number for sleep. And then you look at it when you get into this mood-dependent recall.
Mm-hmm.
This is your antidote to that. Your written record, written at the time. Because if you try and wait until the end of the week and mood-dependent recall tricks in, your recall is going to lie.
But why is that?
It's an entity that happens. Who knows why? But it happens, and especially if you're stressed or whatever, there is a thought that maybe is there a benefit to depression? And that maybe in primitive times, when a marauding tribe kind of moves into your hunting ground and they're killing all your tribe in order to take it for themselves, maybe that is a good time to go lie at the back of the cave and not go out.
Right.
Maybe that does have a kind of survival basis in terms of evolution.
Right.
Maybe depression is a time to kind of, tell you to get out, get down, hide, and don't do anything. Don't attract any attention. Maybe. But the point is that so that's the kind of level of why.
Mm-hmm.
Why is there depression? Why do we have mood-dependent recall? Well, maybe, back in the day, maybe that was an advantage in some circumstances. But the point is it doesn't help you now. It doesn't let you be the best mom you want to be. It doesn't let you be the best partner you want to be. In fact, it derails you.
Mm-hmm.
It's the enemy. So mood-dependent recall is the antidote. Is you basically look at you've been charting. No, this is not
logging.
Why?
Mm-hmm.
You do the logging.
I do that on an app, but not every day. I will do it on my menstrual period.
I just a calendar for it. You give it a number. It just takes you, not even 30 seconds. But the thing is just to think of it and do it.
Yeah,
But I think that is as good as anything because basically that'll check the reality, check the evidence. And that's your friend. So you've got to worry about carrying on, rather than depending on my phone call.
Yeah.
You're in charge.
Yeah, and when the days that you're not around, I do, I have I have the toolkit now of 9 years of building it, but...
And you've got the notes, which is good. I go over them about once a month. Just glance through them, and I bet you pick up something new or remind yourself of something that might be pertinent that hasn't been applied for a couple of years.
Well, here, 9 years, I look back at my journal, what I've written. I was in a really bad place. Dating bad people, hanging out with bad friends. The self-talk that I had was so toxic from just the environments I was in and not having that disruption of thought or disruption of like, is this okay? Is this a healthy way for me to have this conversation with myself and how I'm approaching things? Yeah, it's a whole mindset shift.
Wow.
You are the best, Dr. Duffy.
Well, you do the work.
Well, yeah, but I wouldn't have known. Like, that's the problem, is sometimes you just get caught into something and you think, I remember when I didn't have glasses, I just thought, well, this is what the world looks like. And then you get glasses.
Very accurate description, but you know what? know what you have now that you didn't have?
Glasses.
No, Oliver.
Yeah.
And you're not going to let stuff go because you got to be your best self to be your best mom. And that's Oliver.
Yeah. I think you're right. I think there's a new accountability.
35, not 25, whatever.
Oh,
Whatever it is.
we'll just stick with that. I'll just pretend I'm 35.
There you go. That's good enough.
Yeah.
Because you got Oliver. And that's call it Oliver, you're logging for Oliver as well as for yourself.
Yeah.
And that makes all the difference. That makes all the difference about sleep and about diet and particular doing the cardio and giving it a number, socializing to make sure, and you weed out the 2s and 3s,
Yeah. Yeah, I mean,
6s and 9s and 10s, and all of that, and mood dependent recall, that sucker, you check the evidence against it, and the evidence will tell you what you need to do and what is working and what is not, what you can trim. And reading your notes, it'll come back. Little things. And just exactly as you did about the thinking traps, emotional reasoning, the alternate point of view. Absolutely.
That has been such a game changer because it's so easy to be hard on yourself.
That's really what this is rebalancing.
Yeah.
And the other thing, the real thing is not looking to a corrupt source for validation.
Yeah.
That should be on everybody's fridge.
Yeah.
And that can really clean. Claire, I'm going to wind it up. And I have no doubts that you will thrive.
Oh, I sure hope so. I mean, at least if I'm not thriving, I'm to whoever listens to this one day, I gotta write out the Duffy method. 9 years of learnings, and I'll let you know when something's published.
That would be very interesting.
Yeah,
Okay.
it will be.
And, do that. The other thing, I have written to your family doctor that, the tune-up every 3 times a year, just to go in and sort of have a review on the level of psychiatric support therapy, which family docs do.
Okay.
I did it as a family doc before I ever had any CBT training. Did that for 30 years. And it can be helped because it is a kind of accountability. So like you said, that's, having to, me calling every month, but if you were having an appointment that was booked for that, just to kind of do that, and that's what I indicated in writing to your family doctor. And it's not that they got to know CBT tools. I think it's just got to be on the basic level of psychiatric support therapy, which family docs can do.
Okay.
It'll just sort of be there as a way of holding you accountable.
I think that's that's really good, because then I just know that that's a trigger for going to my notes, going to my checklist, to my, all the things that I have, my everything, to kind of look at where I'm at.
Yeah. And I think that well-established evidence-based trial, that significantly reduces the risk of relapse and keeps things in remission. 3 times a year, holding you accountable.
Okay. Well, I don't want that.
Okay, Claire?
Yeah. Dr. Duffy, maybe I'll see you one day in the real world.
It very well is likely.
And now I can read all your psycho thriller books, right?
Now you can. Yeah. Now that I no longer am your therapist, you can read all my psycho. Yeah, look them all up.
I will.
Yeah.
Well, you have changed my life.
I'm glad that you're doing well, and I'm basically very pleased with you worked hard. Just basically, I can just read you the opening letter, the opening patient of the letter to your family doctor. Our patient, Claire Bouvier, is another of the long haulers. I've talked about long haulers who've just been over, it's always been my philosophy. I never close a file, and that everybody could just come back when they needed a tune-up. Most did. Anyway, who who's made good use of my open door policy in allowing patients to refer themselves back into sessions as issues and problems develop. This delightful, creative young woman has done very well over the years, applying the abundance of CBT tools and strategies we have covered to the evolving events of her personal growth and evolution. And then I refer her to my initial report on progress dated January 22nd, 2019. From former primary school teacher to budding entrepreneur to advocate for independent businesswomen in small towns to wife and now mother to Oliver, it has been a rich and engaging ride. I have always hesitated to medicalize her enthusiasm and imaginative exuberance. My focus has always been to introduce appropriate CBT strategies and cognitive restructuring techniques as the different situations require. She has thrived on this approach and continues to do well. I have suggested she continue to have occasional check-in appointments with you going forward. She has retained all her notes over the years, and we are spending these last months in clarifying any concepts or techniques that are no longer clear and require review. I think her prognosis is excellent. Thank you for letting me share care of this unique young woman. Okay.
I'm so emotional right now.
Anyway,
Thanks, Dr. Duffy.
Claire, I wish you well. I know you're going to thrive, and you know how to do it.
Thank you.
So,
thank you for everything.
Until the next time, when I'm not your doctor.
Okay.
And, you take care.
Thanks, Dr. Duffy. Till next time. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.